There's a kind of debt that can't be measured in money, but in the weight of fear that crushes your chest every time you hear footsteps behind you. Elena Russo lived with that weight. She wasn't afraid for herself, but for the man who raised her, who loved her, who made one terrible mistake that would cost them everything. Until the day she walked into a marble office overlooking the city and offered the only thing she had left to give: herself. If this story touches your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from. And if you feel it was really worth it, consider becoming a member to get early access to upcoming stories. Your support makes all the difference. The law office smelled of leather and old books, a scent Elena had learned to associate with her father's desperation. For 3 months, she'd watched him crumble under the weight of his gambling addiction, watched him make promises he couldn't keep, watched him borrow from people who didn't accept apologies as payment. Antonio Russo was a good man who made bad choices, and now those choices had led them here, to the edge of a cliff with no way back. Elena sat in the waiting room of her father's bankruptcy attorney, her hands folded in her lap, her spine straight, despite the terror crawling through her veins. She was 24, a literature teacher at a small private school, with brown eyes that held more sadness than someone her age should carry. She wore a simple navy dress, her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. No jewelry except for her mother's gold cross that hung at her throat. A reminder of the woman who died when Elena was 12, the woman who would be horrified by what her husband had become. The attorney's door opened, and her father emerged, his face gray, his eyes hollow. He'd aged a decade in 3 months. Behind him came a man Elena had never seen before, tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her father's car. He had sharp features, dark hair touched with gray at the temples, and eyes the color of espresso that seemed to see through every wall she'd ever built. He glanced at her for only a moment, but that moment felt like being X-rayed, like every secret she carried was suddenly visible. Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. "Elena," her father said, his voice breaking. "We need to talk." They sat in a small cafe 3 blocks away, the kind of place where no one paid attention to other people's conversations. Her father couldn't meet her eyes as he told her the truth. He owed $4 million to Valentino Caruso, the man who controlled half the city's construction business and all of its underground gambling operations. He had 30 days to pay, or they would take everything: the house, the business, and if the rumors were true, much worse. "I'm so sorry," her father whispered, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I destroyed us. I destroyed everything your mother left behind." Elena felt something shift inside her, something cold and calculating that she didn't recognize. She'd spent her whole life being careful, being responsible, being small. She taught children about poetry and symbolism, while her father gambled away their future. She came home every night to an empty apartment and told herself that someday, when things were stable, she'd live her own life. But there was no someday anymore. There was only now, and now required sacrifice. "Where does this Valentino Caruso work?" she asked quietly. Her father looked up, confused. "Elena, no, you can't." "Where?" she repeated, her voice steady despite her racing heart. 2 days later, Elena stood outside a building in the financial district that shouldn't exist. There were no signs, no indication that behind the polished glass and steel facade was the headquarters of an empire built on fear and leverage. She'd done her research. Valentino Caruso was 42, never married, no children. He'd inherited his father's organization at 25 and transformed it from street-level extortion into a sophisticated network that touched everything from real estate to shipping. He was known for 3 things: his absolute control, his ice-cold decision-making, and the fact that he never showed mercy to anyone who crossed him. She was about to walk into the lion's den and offer herself as bait. The lobby was minimalist, all white marble and chrome, with a single receptionist behind a glass desk who looked at Elena like she was an insect that had wandered in from the street. "I'm here to see Mr. Moretti," Elena said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he'll want to see me. I'm Antonio Russo's daughter." The receptionist's expression changed, just slightly. A flicker of recognition, of curiosity. She picked up the phone, spoke quietly, then looked back at Elena. 32nd floor. The elevator ride felt like descending into another world. With each floor, Elena felt the weight of her decision pressing harder against her chest. She was about to offer something that couldn't be taken back, about to trade her freedom for her father's life. But what choice did she have? Let them kill him? Let them take everything her mother worked for? The elevator doors opened to reveal an office that looked like it belonged in a museum. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and the entire space was decorated in dark wood and deep burgundy leather. And there, behind a massive desk, sat Valentino Caruso. He didn't look up immediately. He was reading something on his computer, his fingers steepled in front of him, his posture radiating control. When he finally raised his eyes to meet hers, Elena felt her breath catch. He was even more intimidating up close, all sharp angles and quiet menace. "Miss Russo," he said, his voice low and measured, like distant thunder. "This is unexpected." Elena forced herself to walk forward, to not show the fear pounding through her system. She stopped in front of his desk, her hands clasped to keep them from shaking. "I came to discuss my father's debt," she said. Dante leaned back in his chair, studying her with an expression that gave nothing away. "Your father's debt is not your concern. It is now," Elena replied. "He can't pay you. We both know that." Dante's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Then your father will face the consequences." "What if I could offer you something else?" Elena said, the words tumbling out before her courage failed. Something more valuable than money. Now she had his full attention, his dark eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her want to step back, but she held her ground. Dante stood slowly, walking around the desk with the deliberate grace of a predator. He stopped 3 feet away from her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive and subtle, like cedar and smoke. "What could a schoolteacher possibly offer me that's worth $4 million?" he asked, his tone skeptical but curious. "Myself," Elena said quietly. "For 1 year, complete obedience, whatever you need. No questions, no complaints, no escape. 1 year of my life in exchange for erasing my father's debt completely." The silence that followed was suffocating. Dante stared at her with an expression she couldn't read, his jaw tight, his eyes searching her face for something she didn't understand. Then he laughed, a short, harsh sound without humor. "You have no idea what you're offering," he said, turning away from her. Elena felt something inside her crack, desperation clawing its way up her throat. "I know exactly what I'm offering," she said, her voice stronger now. 1 year of complete service. I'll live in your home, work for you, do whatever you require. I won't run, I won't complain, I won't cause problems. When the year is over, my father's debt is cleared, and I walk away. Free." Dante turned back to face her, and for the first time, she saw something flicker across his features. Not interest exactly, but intrigue. "Why?" he asked simply. "Because he's my father," Elena said. "Because my mother loved him despite his flaws. Because everyone deserves a second chance, even people who don't deserve it. And because I have nothing else left to trade." Dante walked back to his desk and pressed a button on his phone. "Marco, come in." A moment later, a door opened, and a man entered, shorter than Dante but built like a boxer, with a scar running down his left cheek. He looked at Elena with undisguised curiosity. "Run a full background check on Elena Russo," Dante said without looking away from her. "Everything. I want to know where she went to school, who she's dated, how much debt she carries, what books she reads, everything." The man nodded and left. Dante gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. "Sit." Elena sat, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. She wouldn't show weakness. Not now. "You understand," Dante said, sitting back down, "that if I accept this arrangement, you become my property for 1 year. You have no rights, no freedom, no ability to change your mind. You will do exactly as I say, when I say it, without question. If you disobey, the deal is void, and your father's debt returns with interest." Elena swallowed hard but maintained eye contact. "I understand. And you're prepared for what that might mean," he continued, his voice dropping lower. "I'm not looking for a maid or a secretary, Miss Russo. If I accept this, you will belong to me in every sense of the word." Heat flooded Elena's cheeks, but she didn't look away. "I understand," she repeated, though her voice was barely a whisper. Dante studied her for a long moment, then opened a drawer and pulled out a file. Inside were dozens of papers, legal documents with dense text. "This is a contract," he said, pushing it across the desk toward her. "It outlines exactly what you're agreeing to. You have 24 hours to read it, have it reviewed by an attorney if you wish, and decide. If you sign, there's no going back." Elena took the file with trembling hands. "What about my father?" she asked. "If I agree, what happens to him?" "His debt is immediately cleared," Dante said. "He won't be touched, won't be contacted, won't owe anything to anyone in my organization. But he can never know about this arrangement. As far as he's concerned, you're taking a year abroad to teach, or pursue graduate studies, or whatever story you want to tell him. If he discovers the truth, the deal is void." Elena nodded slowly. "And after the year?" "After the year," Dante said, "you walk away. Free. Clear. With a significant payment to help you restart your life. You never speak of this arrangement to anyone, and we never cross paths again. It was a devil's bargain, and they both knew it. But it was also the only way forward." Elena stood, clutching the file to her chest. "I'll read this tonight," she said. "Where should I bring it if I decide to sign?" Dante handed her a business card with only a phone number on it. "Call this number. Someone will come to collect you and the signed contract. And Miss Russo," he added as she turned to leave, "don't make this decision lightly. Once you belong to me, you truly belong to me. Every part of you. I don't share, I don't negotiate, and I don't show mercy. If you sign that contract, your life as you know it ends." Elena met his eyes one last time, seeing the warning there, the darkness that lurked beneath his controlled exterior. "Then I'll make sure I'm ready to let it end," she said, and walked out. That night, Elena sat at her small kitchen table and read every word of the contract. It was thorough, horrifyingly so. She would live in Dante's home, sleep in his bed if he required it, accompany him to any event or location he demanded, and obey any instruction he gave without hesitation or complaint. She would have no contact with friends or family, except through supervised channels. She would wear what he chose, eat what he provided, and exist entirely at his discretion. In exchange, her father's $4 million debt would be erased immediately, and at the end of 1 year, she would receive $1 million and a completely new identity if she desired it. The sexual clauses were explicit and detailed. Elena felt her face burn as she read through them, understanding exactly what she was agreeing to. There would be no romance, no courtship, no pretense of mutual affection. She would be his possession, available whenever he wanted her, however he wanted her. But there were also protection clauses, medical care, safe words, and psychological counseling available if needed. It was a business arrangement, cold and transactional, but not without some consideration for her well-being. At 3 a.m, Elena signed every page with a trembling hand. She packed a small bag with only essentials, wrote a letter to her father, explaining that she'd gotten an opportunity to teach abroad and would be gone for a year, and called the number on the business card. 20 minutes later, a black car pulled up outside her apartment. The driver was silent as he loaded her single bag and opened the door for her. As they drove through the empty city streets, Elena watched her old life disappear through the window. The school where she taught, the cafe where she had coffee every morning, the park where she walked on weekends, all of it fading into the past. The car eventually pulled through a gate and up a long driveway to a mansion that looked like it belonged in a different century. Stone walls, elaborate gardens, windows that glowed with warm light against the darkness. The driver opened her door and led her inside to a foyer with marble floors and a chandelier that must have cost more than her father's house. "Wait here," he said, and disappeared. Elena stood alone, her small bag at her feet, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Then she heard footsteps, and Dante appeared at the top of the grand staircase. He'd changed from his suit into dark slacks and a black shirt, rolled up at the sleeves. He looked less like a businessman and more like what he truly was, dangerous. He descended the stairs slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. "You signed," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Elena whispered. Dante stopped in front of her and held out his hand. "The contract." She handed it to him with shaking fingers. He flipped through it, checking each signature, then folded it and tucked it into his pocket. "From this moment," he said, his voice low and absolute, "you belong to me. You will address me as sir, unless I tell you otherwise. You will obey immediately and completely. You will speak only when spoken to. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," Elena said, the words foreign on her tongue. "Good," Dante said, and for the first time, something that might have been satisfaction flickered across his face. "Then let me show you your new home." He led her through rooms that felt like museums, each one more elaborate than the last. A library with floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with leather-bound books, a dining room with a table that could seat 20, a sitting room with furniture that looked like it belonged in Versailles. But Dante didn't stop at any of them. He climbed a second staircase to the 3rd floor, then down a long hallway to a set of double doors at the very end. "This is my private wing," he said, opening the doors. "No one enters here without my permission. Not staff, not guests, not anyone. For the next year, you will live here with me." The suite beyond was enormous, decorated in deep charcoals and rich burgundies. A massive bed dominated one wall, with furniture arranged in intimate groupings throughout the space. There were 2 doors leading off the main room. "That's the bathroom," Dante said, pointing to one, "and that's your closet. Everything you'll need has been provided." Elena's throat was tight. "Where do I sleep?" she asked quietly. Dante turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "Where do you think you sleep, Miss Russo? You belong to me now. You sleep where I sleep." Elena's breath caught, but she forced herself to nod. "Yes, sir." For a moment, something flickered in Dante's eyes. Something that might have been respect for her composure, or perhaps just amusement at her fear. Then he walked to a bar cart and poured himself 2 fingers of amber liquid. "Are you frightened?" he asked without turning around. "Yes, sir," Elena admitted. There was no point in lying. "Good," Dante said, taking a drink. "Fear means you understand the gravity of what you've done. Stupidity would be far more dangerous." He turned back to face her, leaning against the bar cart with casual grace. "But I want you to understand something, Elena. I didn't accept your offer because I need a servant or a whore. I have access to both whenever I want them. I accepted because you offered something much rarer." "What's that?" Elena asked, confused. "Willing sacrifice," Dante said. "You walked into my office knowing what I was, what I could do to you, and you offered yourself anyway. Not because you wanted money or power or protection for yourself, but to save someone else. That kind of loyalty is valuable. That kind of courage is dangerous. And I wanted to see what kind of woman possesses both." Elena didn't know what to say to that, so she stayed silent. Dante set down his glass and walked toward her, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "I'm going to ask you a question," he said, "and I want complete honesty. Have you ever been with a man?" Heat flooded Elena's face, but she held his gaze. "No, sir." Dante's jaw tightened. "Have you ever been touched by a man?" "No, sir." His eyes darkened with something she couldn't identify. "Why not?" "Because I was waiting," Elena said quietly. "For what?" "For someone who made me feel safe enough to be vulnerable. For someone I trusted. For love." The words sounded naive, even as she said them, childish in the face of what was about to happen. Dante reached out and traced his thumb along her jaw, a touch so gentle it contradicted everything she expected. "Love is a fairy tale, Elena. A story we tell ourselves to make sense of biology and convenience. What we have is much simpler. You need protection. I want possession. That's honest. That's real." His thumb moved to her lower lip, pressing gently. "I'm going to teach you things," he continued, his voice dropping lower. "I'm going to touch you in ways you've never been touched. I'm going to take your body and shape it to my preferences. And you're going to learn to respond to me, to crave my approval, to exist entirely for my pleasure. But here's what you need to understand. I don't break my possessions. I value them, which means I won't hurt you beyond what you can handle. I won't humiliate you publicly. And I won't demand anything without making sure you survive it. Do you understand?" Elena's heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "Yes, sir." "Good." Dante stepped back. "Tonight you sleep. Tomorrow your training begins. There are clothes in the closet. Choose something comfortable and come to bed." He walked to the far side of the massive bed and began unbuttoning his shirt, completely unself-conscious. Elena stood frozen for a moment, then forced her legs to move toward the closet he'd indicated. Inside, she found dozens of items she'd never have chosen for herself. Silk nightgowns, lace underwear, soft cotton sets that cost more than her monthly salary. She grabbed the most modest option, a simple black silk nightgown, and changed quickly in the bathroom. When she emerged, Dante was already in bed, propped against the pillows, reading something on his phone. He glanced up as she approached, and his expression shifted slightly. Something that might have been approval. He lifted the blanket on the other side of the bed in silent invitation. Elena climbed in carefully, staying as far from him as the bed allowed. The sheets were impossibly soft, the mattress perfectly firm. Dante set his phone aside and turned off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness. Elena lay completely still, her body rigid with tension, waiting for something to happen. But Dante didn't move toward her. He simply said, "Sleep well, Elena." Tomorrow everything changes, and she heard him settle into his pillows. Elena lay awake for hours, listening to his breathing deepen and slow, until exhaustion finally dragged her under. She woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the space beside her empty. For a moment, she thought perhaps it had all been a nightmare. Then she saw the note on the pillow next to her, written in bold, masculine handwriting. "Elena, There's breakfast in the sitting room. Eat. Shower. In the closet, you'll find clothing laid out for today. Put it on. Nothing else. I'll return at 9. Be ready." The signature was simply a D with a sharp, aggressive slash. Elena got up on trembling legs and found the sitting room, a smaller space off the bedroom, with a table set with fresh fruit, pastries, coffee, and juice. Her stomach was in knots, but she forced herself to eat, knowing she'd need the energy for whatever was coming. After breakfast, she showered in the most luxurious bathroom she'd ever seen. Marble everywhere, a rainfall shower head that felt like heaven, and products that smelled of jasmine and honey. Back in the closet, she found the outfit Dante had selected, a simple white dress, fitted but not tight, that fell to just above her knees. Underneath, delicate lace underwear in matching white. No bra. Her face burned as she put it on, feeling exposed despite being completely covered. At exactly 9, she heard the doors to the suite open. Dante entered, dressed now in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, looking every inch the powerful man he was. His eyes traveled over her slowly, assessing, and she saw something flicker in them. Approval. "Turn around," he said. Elena turned slowly, her heart hammering. "Good. The dress suits you. Innocent but accessible. Come here." Elena walked toward him, stopping when she was close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. He reached out and gently removed the elastic holding her hair back, letting it fall around her shoulders. "Better," he murmured, running his fingers through it. "You have beautiful hair. Why do you always hide it?" "It's more professional for teaching," Elena said quietly. "You're not a teacher anymore," Dante reminded her. "You're mine. And I prefer your hair down. From now on, you'll wear it this way unless I tell you otherwise." "Yes, sir." He stepped back slightly, studying her. "Today we begin your training. Not the physical part. Not yet. First, you need to understand the rules of this house and your place in it. Come with me." He led her back through the suite to a small office she hadn't noticed before, with a desk, 2 chairs, and walls lined with books. "Sit," he instructed, pointing to one of the chairs. Elena sat. Dante remained standing, leaning against the desk with his arms crossed. "Rule 1, Dante began, his voice taking on a formal, instructive tone. "You exist for my convenience and pleasure. Your needs are secondary, but not ignored. If you're hungry, cold, in pain, or uncomfortable in a way that affects your ability to serve me, you will speak up immediately. I can't use you effectively if you're suffering in silence. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," Elena said. "Rule 2. You address me as sir at all times, unless we're in public, in which case, you'll use whatever name I give you in that moment. You don't speak unless spoken to when we're with others. You don't offer opinions unless asked. You exist as an extension of me, graceful and silent. Rule 3. Your body belongs to me. That means I decide what you eat, when you sleep, what you wear, and how you present yourself. But it also means I'm responsible for your health and safety. You will exercise daily, eat properly, and inform me immediately of any medical concerns. Rule 4. You will be available to me at all times. When I want you, I'll take you. Where I want you, I'll have you. How I want you, I'll use you. But there are limits." He pushed off the desk and walked to a drawer, pulling out a small velvet box. Inside were 3 colored stones on delicate chains: green, yellow, and red. "This is your safety system," Dante explained. "Green means you're comfortable and willing. Yellow means you're approaching a limit and need me to slow down or adjust. Red means stop immediately. No questions, no consequences." These are not suggestions, Elena. If you say red, everything stops. I won't be angry. I won't punish you. The contract is built on your consent, even if that consent is coerced by circumstance. He set the box on the desk in front of her. You'll keep these with you at all times. Do you understand how to use them? Yes, sir, Elena said, staring at the stones. But why would you give me an out if you own me? Because ownership without care is destruction, Dante said simply. And I don't destroy valuable things. I cultivate them. There's a difference between possession and abuse, Elena. I intend to possess every part of you, but I have no interest in breaking you. Broken things are useless. He returned to his position against the desk. Rule 5. You will accompany me to various events and locations as needed. In public, you will be charming, gracious, and attentive. You will make me look good. You will never embarrass me or draw unwanted attention. In private, you will be submissive, obedient, and responsive. The dichotomy is important. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Rule 6. No contact with your father beyond the occasional supervised message to maintain the fiction that you're abroad. No contact with friends. No social media. No internet access except for approved educational materials. For this year, I am your entire world. Elena felt her chest tighten at that, the reality of her isolation settling in. Dante must have seen something in her expression, because he continued. This isn't cruelty, Elena. It's necessity. The more connections you maintain to your old life, the harder this will be. Clean breaks heal faster. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Rule 7. And this is critical, Dante said, his tone sharpening. Absolute honesty. I don't care if the truth makes you look bad or contradicts what you think I want to hear. Lies undermine everything. If I ask you a question, you answer truthfully, or you say you're not ready to answer yet. But you never, ever lie to me. Because if I catch you in a lie, the consequences will be severe. Do you understand? Yes, sir, Elena whispered. Dante studied her for a long moment. Now, I want you to ask me 3 questions. Anything you want to know. This is your only chance for curiosity. Without permission, use it wisely. Elena's mind raced. There were 1,000 things she wanted to know, but 3 questions felt both generous and restricting. She chose carefully. Why did you really accept my offer? Dante's lips curved slightly. Because in 15 years of running this organization, no one has ever walked into my office and offered me something I didn't know I wanted. Everyone wants something from me. Power, money, protection, favors. But you offered pure sacrifice with nothing in it for yourself. That intrigued me. I wanted to understand what drives someone to that level of selflessness and whether I could own it. Elena absorbed that, then asked her second question. Have you done this before? Had someone live with you like this? No, Dante said. I've had lovers, of course, arrangements, but nothing like this. You're an experiment, Elena. I'm curious to see if possession can be more satisfying than the usual transactions I'm accustomed to. And your third question. Elena hesitated, then spoke the thing she most feared. Will you hurt me? Dante pushed off the desk and walked to where she sat. He crouched down so they were eye level, his dark eyes boring into hers. Yes, he said simply. Not in the way you're imagining. Not violence or cruelty for its own sake. But I will push you past your comfort zone. I will take you to edges you didn't know you had. I will test your limits and occasionally exceed them to see how you respond. That will hurt, emotionally, if not physically. But I will also teach you things about yourself you never knew. I will show you what your body is capable of when fear is removed. And I will give you experiences that will reshape how you understand pleasure and power. He reached out and cupped her face with one large hand, his thumb stroking her cheek. "The question isn't whether I'll hurt you, Elena. The question is whether you'll trust me to put you back together afterward." "Can you do that? Can you trust me?" Elena thought about lying, about saying yes to appease him, but he'd just told her never to lie, so she gave him the truth. "I don't know yet, sir." Dante smiled, a real smile this time that transformed his entire face. "Good answer. Trust is earned, not given. We have a year for me to earn yours." He stood and extended his hand. "Come. I want to show you something." He led her out of the suite and down to the first floor, through a door she hadn't noticed before that opened onto a staircase leading down. The basement was cool and dimly lit, but as they descended, Elena realized it wasn't a basement at all. It was an underground wing, as elaborate as the rest of the house. Dante walked her past several closed doors until they reached one at the very end. He pulled a key from his pocket and unlocked it. Inside was a room that took Elena's breath away. The walls were lined with mirrors. In the center was a large bed, with posts at each corner and silk ropes already attached. Along one wall were cabinets, their contents hidden behind frosted glass. There was a sitting area with a plush sofa, and in one corner, what looked like a photography setup, with lights and a backdrop. "This is where you'll learn," Dante said, his voice echoing slightly in the space. "Everything I teach you about your body, about pleasure, about submission, will happen here. This is a safe space, Elena. Nothing that happens here will ever leave these walls. No one else will ever enter. It's just you and me." Elena stared at the room, her mind spinning with images of what might happen here. "Are you frightened?" Dante asked, but his tone wasn't mocking. He genuinely wanted to know. "Yes, sir," Elena admitted, "but not the way you might think." "Explain," he commanded. "I'm not afraid you'll hurt me physically," she said slowly, trying to find the words. "I'm afraid of who I might become in this room, of what I might discover about myself." Dante moved closer, standing behind her so she could see both their reflections in the mirrored wall. "That's the most honest thing you've said since you arrived," he murmured, "and it's exactly why this will work. You're already asking the right questions." He placed his hands on her shoulders, and she watched in the mirror as he leaned down to speak close to her ear. "Everyone has darkness inside them, Elena. Desires they don't want to acknowledge. Needs they're ashamed of. Most people spend their whole lives pretending those things don't exist. But here, in this room, you don't get to pretend. Here, we explore everything. And I promise you, by the time this year is over, you'll know yourself better than you ever thought possible." His hand slid down her arms, a gentle touch that somehow felt more intimate than anything else he'd done. "We're not starting today," he said. "Today is about boundaries and understanding. But soon, very soon." He stepped back, and Elena felt the loss of his warmth immediately. "Let's go back upstairs. You have lessons." For the rest of the day, Dante introduced Elena to the strange new rhythm of her life. She had Italian lessons with a tutor who came to the house, because Dante expected her to understand his mother tongue. She had posture and movement training with a former dancer who taught her how to walk, sit, and stand in ways that exuded grace and submission simultaneously. She had wine education, learning to identify vintages and regions. And in the evening, she had dinner alone with Dante in his private dining room. The dinner was surprisingly normal, or as normal as anything could be in this situation. Dante asked about her lessons, listened to her answers, and occasionally corrected her posture or the way she held her wine glass. He was patient but exacting, and Elena found herself desperately wanting his approval, even though she knew that desire was part of the conditioning he was implementing. After dinner, he led her back to the bedroom and handed her a book. Read this, he said. It's about the psychology of dominance and submission, the healthy kind. I want you to understand what we're building here, that it's not abuse or exploitation, but a consensual power exchange. Tomorrow we'll discuss it. Elena took the book with trembling hands. That night, she lay in bed next to Dante again, reading by the soft glow of her bedside lamp while he worked on his laptop. The book was surprisingly academic, discussing attachment styles, trust dynamics, and the neurological basis for why some people crave structure and control in intimate relationships. As she read, she became aware of Dante watching her. She lowered the book slightly. "Sir? What are you thinking right now?" he asked, setting aside his laptop. "Honestly," she said, remembering his rule about truth, "I'm thinking that this is nothing like I expected." "How so?" "I expected you to be cruel," she admitted, "to take what you wanted without caring about how I felt, or what I needed. But everything today has been about teaching me, helping me understand, preparing me." "Why?" Dante was quiet for a moment, then reached over and took the book from her hands, setting it aside. "Let me tell you a story," he said. "When I was 25 and inherited my father's organization, I was angry. At him for dying, at the world for the hand I was dealt, at everyone who expected me to be a monster just like him. And for a while, I tried to be that monster. I thought cruelty was strength, that fear was respect, that taking what I wanted without asking made me powerful." He paused, his eyes distant. "But I learned something important. Cruelty is easy. Any weak man can hurt someone smaller than himself. Real power comes from control, from precision, from understanding exactly how to shape someone into what you need them to be, without destroying what makes them valuable in the first place. My father ruled through fear, and everyone who served him hated him. They stayed because they were afraid, and the moment he died, half of them tried to take what he'd built. But I rule through loyalty earned, not fear imposed, and that loyalty is infinitely more powerful." He looked back at her, his expression intense. "You're here because of coercion, yes. Your father's debt forced this choice. But I could have simply owned you like an object, used you however I wanted, with no thought to your experience. Instead, I'm investing time and energy into shaping you properly, because in the long run, willing submission is far more valuable than forced compliance. A broken slave serves out of fear. A willing one serves because she chooses to, even when the choice is made under duress. And that's what I'm creating, Elena. A woman who chooses to submit because she understands the value in it, because it fulfills something in her she didn't know she needed." Elena absorbed his words, feeling something shift inside her. "Are you saying I'll learn to want this?" "Some part of you already wants it," Dante said. "You just don't know it yet. Otherwise, you wouldn't have walked into my office with that offer. You could have run, could have taken your father and disappeared. But you didn't, because somewhere deep inside, you were tired of being invisible, of being careful, of living a small life. You wanted to matter, even if mattering meant sacrificing yourself. And that impulse, that desire for significance, that's what I'm going to feed until it becomes something else entirely." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to deny what he was suggesting, but the words stuck in her throat because some part of her recognized the truth in what he said. She had been invisible, had been living a half-life, teaching other people's children about passion and literature, while having none of her own. "Sleep," Dante said gently, reaching over to turn off her lamp. "Tomorrow we begin the physical lessons." Elena's heart jumped. "Already?" "You've had 3 days to acclimate," he said. "That's enough. Don't worry, I'll be careful with you, at least at first." He turned off his own light and the room fell into darkness. Elena lay awake, her body tense, imagining what tomorrow might bring. The next morning, Dante woke her before sunrise. "Put on workout clothes," he said. "You'll find them in the closet. We're starting with physical training." Elena dressed in the fitted black leggings and sports bra she found laid out, then followed Dante down to the basement. But instead of the mirrored room, he led her to a fully equipped gym. For the next 90 minutes, he put her through an intense workout, correcting her form, pushing her past where she thought she could go, and watching her with an intensity that felt almost predatory. By the end, she was drenched in sweat and shaking with exhaustion. "Good," Dante said, handing her a towel. "Your body is weak right now, untrained. We're going to change that. Strength isn't just physical, Elena. When you're physically strong, you're mentally strong. And I need you mentally strong for what's coming." He led her back upstairs to shower, then joined her in the bathroom. Elena froze as he began undressing. "What are you?" she started. "Getting in the shower with you," he said calmly. "You're going to learn to be comfortable with your body and mine. That starts now. Strip." Elena's hands shook as she pulled off her workout clothes, hyper-aware of his eyes on her. She'd never been naked in front of anyone before, and the vulnerability was overwhelming. Dante stepped into the massive shower and turned on the water, then gestured for her to join him. Elena stepped in, keeping her eyes down, her arms instinctively crossing over her chest. "Arms down," he commanded. Elena dropped her arms, fighting every instinct to cover herself. Dante took the soap and began washing her, his hands impersonal but thorough, cleaning her back, her arms, her legs. When his hands moved to more intimate areas, Elena tensed. "Yellow," she whispered, using the safety word. Immediately, Dante's hands stilled. "What do you need?" he asked, his voice gentler. "I just need a moment," Elena said, her voice shaking. It's a lot." "All right," Dante said, stepping back to give her space. "Take your time. We're not on a schedule." Elena took several deep breaths, fighting the panic rising in her chest. She looked up at Dante and found him watching her with something that looked almost like concern. "I'm going to continue," he said. "If you need me to stop again, say yellow or red. But I need you to try to stay present. Don't disappear into your head. Focus on the physical sensations, not the fear. Can you do that?" Elena nodded, and Dante resumed washing her, his touch clinical but somehow soothing. By the time he finished, Elena felt strangely calm, as if some barrier inside her had cracked just slightly. "Good," Dante said, turning off the water. "You did well. That wasn't easy, but you pushed through it." He wrapped her in a towel, then dried himself off. The rest of the day followed a pattern: lessons, training, meals with Dante where they discussed philosophy and literature and the dynamics of power. Elena found herself surprising both of them with her questions and insights, and more than once, she saw something like respect flash across Dante's face. That evening, after dinner, Dante led her to the mirrored room. Elena's heart began racing immediately. "We're not doing anything intense tonight," Dante said, sensing her fear. "Tonight is just about touch and trust." He led her to the bed and had her lie down on her back. Then he simply sat beside her and began touching her, her arms, her legs, her stomach, her neck. Just touching, learning the landscape of her body. His hands were warm and sure, and gradually Elena felt some of the tension leave her muscles. "Close your eyes," Dante instructed. "Just feel. Don't think." Elena closed her eyes and focused on the sensation of his hands moving over her skin. It was intimate, but not sexual, exploratory, but not invasive. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes, Dante pulled a blanket over her. "How do you feel?" he asked. Strange, Elena admitted, like my body doesn't entirely belong to me anymore. That's exactly right, Dante said, because it doesn't. It belongs to me. But I'm teaching you that's not something to fear. When you trust someone completely with your body, when you surrender that control, it creates a kind of freedom you can't find any other way. You'll understand eventually. That night, back in his bed, Elena found herself lying closer to Dante than she had the previous nights. Not touching, but close enough to feel his warmth. And for the first time since she'd signed that contract, she fell asleep without crying. The days began to blur into a rhythm that Elena found both terrifying and strangely comforting. Morning workouts with Dante, where he pushed her body to limits she didn't know she had. Afternoons filled with lessons. Italian, wine, art history, classical music, everything a sophisticated companion should know. Evenings with Dante in the mirrored room, where he continued teaching her about touch, about sensation, about the strange alchemy of trust and vulnerability. He never took more than she could give, but he took more each night, his hands exploring further, his instructions becoming more intimate. And through it all, Elena felt herself changing. The girl who had walked into his office 4 weeks ago had been small, frightened, desperate. The woman she was becoming was something else entirely. One evening, 6 weeks into her year, Dante came to find her in the library where she'd been reading. "We have an event tonight," he said. "You're accompanying me." Elena looked up, surprised. This would be her first time leaving the house since she'd arrived. "What kind of event?" "A charity gala," Dante said. "Art auction benefiting children's hospitals. We'll be there for approximately 3 hours. You'll stay by my side, speak when spoken to, and be charming. In your closet, you'll find a gown and accessories laid out. Be ready in 2 hours." "Yes, sir," Elena said, setting down her book. In the closet, she found a gown that made her breath catch, deep emerald green silk that hugged her body like water, with a neckline that was elegant but revealing, and a slit up one side that showed a dangerous amount of leg. The accessories were simple but clearly expensive: diamond earrings and a delicate bracelet. Elena showered and did her makeup carefully, remembering the lessons she'd had in creating a sophisticated look. When she emerged from the bedroom, Dante was waiting in the sitting room, dressed in a black tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped out of a film. His eyes traveled over her slowly, and for the first time, she saw unguarded appreciation in them. "You're stunning," he said simply. In the car, Dante reviewed expectations. "You're my companion for the evening, not my employee or my slave. In public, we're equals in appearance, if not in reality. You'll use my first name. You'll smile, be gracious, and if anyone asks, we've been seeing each other for a few months. If anyone makes you uncomfortable, you squeeze my hand twice. I'll extract us immediately. Do you understand?" "Yes," Elena said, noticing he hadn't said, "Sir." The gala was in a historic mansion that had been converted into a museum with soaring ceilings and walls covered in masterpieces. As they entered, Elena was immediately aware of the attention they drew. Women looked at Dante with open desire. Men looked at Elena with curiosity and appreciation. Dante kept his hand on the small of her back, a possessive touch that somehow made her feel safe rather than owned. He introduced her to dozens of people, wealthy patrons, politicians, business leaders, and Elena found herself slipping into the role he'd trained her for. She was charming without being forward, intelligent without being threatening, beautiful without being vain. She made Dante look good, and she could see his satisfaction in the way he looked at her. Halfway through the evening, a man approached them, older, distinguished, with cold eyes that made Elena's skin crawl. "Dante," he said, shaking hands. "Good to see you. And who is this lovely creature?" "This is Elena," Dante said, his hand tightening slightly on her back. "Elena, this is Vincent Caruso. He's in commercial real estate." They shook hands, but Vincent held her hand too long, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. "You have excellent taste as always, Dante," Vincent said, still looking at Elena. "Where did you find such a beauty?" "She's a teacher," Dante said, his voice taking on an edge that Elena recognized as dangerous. "Literature. Private school." "How fascinating," Vincent said. "I've always thought teachers were undervalued. Perhaps we could discuss educational philanthropy over dinner sometime, miss?" Elena felt her stomach turn, but she maintained her smile. She squeezed Dante's hand twice. "I'm afraid Elena and I have a very full social calendar," Dante said smoothly. "But I'll have my assistant send over information about our foundation's educational initiatives. I'm sure you'll find them a more efficient use of your charitable impulses." He guided Elena away without waiting for a response. Once they were out of earshot, Dante leaned down to whisper in her ear. That was well done, recognizing a predator and signaling for extraction without making a scene. "You're learning." Elena felt a strange flush of pride at his approval. The rest of the evening passed without incident, and Elena found herself actually enjoying parts of it. The art was beautiful, the conversation stimulating, and Dante was attentive and protective in a way that made her feel valued. On the drive home, Dante was quiet, staring out the window at the city lights. Elena glanced at him, noting the tension in his jaw. "Sir?" she said softly. Dante turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Men like Vincent Caruso," he said quietly. "They think everything is for sale. They think because they have money, they can take whatever they want, whomever they want." His hand clenched into a fist on his thigh. "You handled it perfectly. But it reminded me why I rarely bring anyone into my world. Because predators recognize vulnerability, and they exploit it." "Am I vulnerable?" Elena asked. "Yes," Dante said bluntly. "You're in my possession, which means you're protected by my reputation. But that protection only extends as far as my reach. If someone like Caruso got you alone, decided you were worth the risk of angering me, he wouldn't hesitate." The knowledge settled into Elena's stomach like ice. "So I'm never truly safe," she said. "You're as safe as I can make you," Dante replied, "which is safer than most people in this city. But no, you're not invulnerable. No one is." The rest of the ride was silent. Back at the house, Dante walked her up to the bedroom, but didn't follow his usual evening routine. Instead, he poured himself a drink and stood by the window, staring out at the grounds. Elena changed out of the gown and into one of the silk nightgowns, then approached him carefully. "Sir? Is something wrong?" Dante took a long drink before answering. "Seeing you tonight," he said, "watching other men look at you, want you, imagine taking you from me. It reminded me that this arrangement has an expiration date, that in less than 10 months, you'll walk away, and I'll have no claim on you anymore." The vulnerability in his admission shocked her. "You'll have your freedom," Elena said carefully. "Isn't that what you want?" "I don't know what I want anymore," Dante admitted. 6 weeks ago, this was an experiment, a test to see if possession could be more satisfying than the usual transactions. But somewhere along the way, you stopped being an experiment and started being something I don't have a name for." He turned to face her fully. "You were supposed to just be a possession, Elena. Something I owned and used and eventually released. But you've become more than that. You challenge me. You surprise me. You make me want to be better than I am. And that's dangerous, because I can't afford to be soft in my world. Softness gets you killed." Elena took a step closer. "I don't think wanting to be better makes you soft," she said. "I think it makes you human." Dante laughed, a harsh sound. I gave up being human a long time ago. Everything I am is calculated. Every decision is strategic. Caring about you beyond your utility is a strategic error." Elena felt something crack open in her chest. "Do you care about me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dante set down his glass and closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch both gentle and desperate. "I'm not supposed to," he said. "But yes. God help me. Yes." Then he kissed her, and it was nothing like Elena had imagined a kiss could be. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was consuming, possessive, a claiming that went beyond anything they'd done in the mirrored room. His hands tangled in her hair, his body pressed against hers, and Elena felt herself melting into him, responding in ways she didn't know she was capable of. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. Dante rested his forehead against hers. "I need you," he said, his voice raw. "Not as an experiment or a possession. I need you. Can you give me that?" Elena's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, sir." Dante lifted her into his arms and carried her to the bed, laying her down with a gentleness that contradicted the intensity of his kiss. Then he began removing her nightgown with careful, deliberate movements, his eyes never leaving hers. "This changes everything," he warned. "Once I take you completely, once you give yourself to me fully, there's no going back to what we were before." "Are you sure?" Elena thought about the girl she'd been 2 months ago, small and scared, and desperately trying to save her father. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who'd learned to be strong, to trust, to surrender control, and find freedom in that surrender. A woman who'd been reshaped by this man's careful attention and exacting standards. A woman who wanted this, not because she had to, but because somewhere along the way, possession had turned into something that looked dangerously like love. "I'm sure," Elena said, reaching up to pull him down to her. "Then show me I belong to you." And Dante did. What happened that night was beyond anything Elena could have imagined or prepared for. Dante was patient, but thorough, teaching her body to respond to his touch, his voice, his commands. He was careful with her inexperience, but demanding in his expectations, guiding her through territory she'd never explored, while making her feel safe enough to let go of every inhibition. He worshipped her body like it was sacred, while claiming it like it was his absolute right. And by the time the sun began rising through the windows, Elena understood what it meant to be completely possessed by another person, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, in every way that mattered. She lay in Dante's arms afterward, her body trembling with aftershocks, her mind struggling to process everything she felt. "You're mine now," Dante murmured against her hair. "Completely mine. Do you understand that?" "Yes, sir," Elena whispered, and meant it in a way she hadn't before. She was his, not because a contract said so, but because some fundamental part of her had recognized him as the person she'd been waiting for all along. The person who could hold all of her, the fear and the strength and the darkness and the light, without flinching. Over the next few months, their relationship deepened in ways that both surprised and terrified Elena. In public, they maintained the careful facade of sophisticated companions. At home, they fell into a rhythm that blended dominance and devotion so completely that Elena often couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Dante continued training her, pushing her boundaries, but now there was something different underlying everything. Care. Real care that went beyond not damaging his possession. He learned her triggers and her fears, and instead of exploiting them, he helped her work through them. When she woke from nightmares about her father discovering the truth, Dante held her and told her stories about his own father, until she calmed. When she struggled with lessons, he sat with her for hours, patient and encouraging in ways that seemed to surprise him as much as they surprised her. And slowly, Elena realized something terrifying. She was falling in love with her captor. One afternoon, 8 months into her year, Elena was in the library when Dante's phone rang. She heard his voice change, heard the sharp commands, and knew immediately something was wrong. When he came to find her, his face was granite. "There's a problem," he said without preamble. "One of my business partners has been arrested. Federal charges. And he's decided to cooperate with prosecutors, which means he's giving up names, operations, connections." Elena felt ice flood her veins. "Are you in danger?" "Potentially," Dante said, "which means you're in danger. I'm moving you tonight to a safe house outside the city until I can assess the situation." Within 2 hours, Elena was in a car with 2 of Dante's most trusted security personnel, heading to a property she'd never seen before. Dante couldn't come with her immediately. He had to manage the crisis, contain the damage. He'd promised to join her within 48 hours. The safe house was a cabin in the mountains, beautifully appointed, but isolated. For 3 days, Elena waited, watching the news for any mention of Dante's name, wondering if this was how her year would end, not with freedom, but with tragedy. On the 4th day, Dante finally arrived, looking exhausted and harder than she'd ever seen him. "The problem is contained," he said, as he came through the door. But it was close, too close. Elena ran to him, throwing her arms around him in a way she never had before. Outside the bedroom, outside the established protocols of their arrangement, just pure relief that he was alive and safe. Dante stiffened for a moment. Then his arms came around her, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "I thought I might not see you again," Elena admitted against his chest. "I thought something might happen to you, and I'd never get to tell you." "Tell me what?" Dante asked, pulling back to look at her face. Elena took a shaky breath. "That I love you. That this stopped being about a contract months ago. That the thought of walking away in 4 months makes me feel like I'm dying inside." Dante's expression went through several changes before settling on something between pain and hope. "Elena, you don't understand what you're saying. You've been conditioned, trained to feel attached to me. It's not real." "It's real to me," Elena said fiercely. "I know the difference between Stockholm Syndrome and actual love. I'm not some naive girl who doesn't understand her own mind. I've spent 8 months learning exactly who you are, the good and the terrible. And I love you anyway. I love you because of who you are, not despite it." Dante closed his eyes. "You can't love me. I own you. It's not possible to love someone who took away your choices." "I made a choice," Elena said. "Every day I choose to be here. Every day I choose to surrender to you. Not because I have to, but because it's what I want. Because you've shown me parts of myself I never knew existed. Because you've made me stronger, even while teaching me to submit. Because you care about me in ways you pretend you don't." Dante opened his eyes, and Elena saw something she'd never seen before. Tears. "I don't know how to love someone," he said roughly. "I don't know how to be anything other than what I am." "Then be what you are," Elena said, taking his face in her hands. "And let me love you anyway." And Dante broke, pulling her against him and kissing her like she was oxygen, and he'd been drowning. They spent 3 days in that cabin, isolated from the world, and in that time, something fundamental shifted between them. Dante stopped trying to maintain the careful distance he'd cultivated, stopped pretending this was just an arrangement. They talked about the future, the real future, not the one outlined in the contract, about what might be possible if Elena chose to stay beyond her year, about what a life together might look like outside the rigid structure of ownership. about whether love could exist in the context of their power dynamic, or whether loving each other meant fundamentally changing what they were. There were no easy answers, but for the first time, they were asking the questions together. When they returned to the city, there were 4 months left on Elena's contract. 4 months until she would technically be free to walk away. But the question of freedom had become more complicated, because Elena had discovered something unexpected. She didn't want to walk away. Not from Dante, not from the life they'd built, not from the woman she'd become in his possession. But she also couldn't stay under the terms of the original contract. Not anymore. If she stayed, it had to be as an equal partner, not as property. And she didn't know if Dante was capable of that fundamental shift. 3 months before the contract expired, Elena made a decision. She found Dante in his office and closed the door behind her. "We need to talk," she said. Dante looked up from his computer, immediately reading the seriousness in her expression. He gestured to the chair across from his desk, but Elena shook her head. "I need to say this standing." "All right," Dante said carefully. "I want to renegotiate our contract," Elena said. Dante's expression became unreadable. "The contract isn't negotiable. The terms were set." "I know," Elena said. "But the circumstances have changed. We've changed. And I need something different now." "What do you need?" Dante asked, his voice tight. "I need to choose you," Elena said. "Not because of my father's debt, not because I'm fulfilling an obligation, but because I want to. I need you to tear up that contract and let me walk away free and clear. And then I need you to ask me to come back, not as your possession, but as your partner." The silence that followed Elena's request was deafening. Dante stared at her with an expression she couldn't read, his jaw tight, his hands clenched on the arms of his chair. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. "You want me to give up my leverage," he said. "Give up the contract that ensures your compliance, and trust that you'll come back." "Yes," Elena said simply. "Because if you love me the way I think you do, the way I love you, then you have to give me the choice. Real choice, not coerced choice. You have to let me be free to decide." "And what if you decide not to come back?" Dante asked. "What if I tear up that contract, and you walk out that door, and I never see you again?" "Then you'll know I wasn't really yours," Elena said gently. "You'll know that what we had was built entirely on obligation and conditioning, not genuine feeling." "But Dante, I don't think that's true. I think if you let me go, I'll come back. Because I'm not staying for the contract anymore. I'm staying for you." Dante stood abruptly, turning away from her to stare out the window. For a long moment he said nothing. Then his shoulders sagged, and Elena saw the weight he'd been carrying finally settle fully onto him. "You're asking me to do the hardest thing I've ever done," he said. "Everything in my life is about control, about ensuring outcomes, about never leaving anything to chance. And you're asking me to let go completely, to trust." "Yes," Elena said. "I'm asking you to trust me. Because that's what love is. It's not possession or control or ensuring compliance. It's choosing to be vulnerable with someone and trusting them not to destroy you with that vulnerability." Dante turned back to face her, and she saw the fear in his eyes, naked and raw. "What if I can't do it?" he asked. "What if I tear up that contract and panic and try to control you anyway? What if I ruin this because I don't know how to be anything other than what I am?" "Then we'll work through it," Elena said. "Together. As partners. But Dante, you have to take the first step. You have to choose to let me be free." Dante walked to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out the contract. The same contract Elena had signed 10 months ago, the one that had started everything. He stared at it for a long moment, then slowly, deliberately, he tore it in half. then in quarters, then into pieces too small to ever be put back together. "It's done," he said, his voice rough. "You're free. The debt is cleared. You can walk out that door right now, and I have no claim on you." Elena's heart was pounding. She looked at the shredded contract, at Dante's face, at the door that was suddenly open. And then she looked at the man who'd taught her to be strong by teaching her to surrender, who'd shown her the power in vulnerability, who'd reshaped her entire understanding of herself and what she was capable of. "I'm not leaving," she said. Dante's head snapped up. "What?" "I'm not leaving," Elena repeated. "Not today. Not when the year is up. Not ever. Because I choose you, Dante. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because you're the best and worst thing that ever happened to me, and I can't imagine my life without you in it." Something broke in Dante's expression, and suddenly he was across the room, pulling her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. "I love you," he said, the words muffled, but clear. "God help me. I love you so much it terrifies me." "I love you too," Elena whispered, holding him tight. "But Dante, we can't go back to the way things were." "I know," he said, pulling back, to look at her. "So we move forward. We figure out what this looks like when neither of us is following a script. When it's just two people who love each other, trying to build something real." Over the next few months, they did exactly that. It wasn't easy. Dante struggled with his need for control, with the vulnerability that came from loving someone who could now leave whenever she wanted. Elena struggled with understanding her own desires, figuring out what submission and surrender meant when it was a choice rather than an obligation. They fought, sometimes loudly, sometimes with the kind of intensity that came from two strong people learning to compromise. But they also grew, both individually and together. Dante began delegating more of his business, trusting others in ways he never had before. Elena went back to teaching, but at a university this time, using everything she'd learned about literature and art and the complexity of human nature to inspire her students. And at night, they came home to each other. Sometimes Dante was the controlled, dominant man who'd first claimed her. Sometimes he was vulnerable and open in ways he'd never been before. Sometimes Elena submitted completely, finding peace in surrendering to his control. Sometimes she challenged him, pushed back, demanded equality and partnership. They were learning to hold both truths simultaneously, that love could include dominance and submission. That partnership didn't mean giving up the power dynamic that worked for them, that freedom could exist within the context of willing surrender. One evening, a year and a half after Elena had first walked into Dante's office, they were having dinner on the terrace overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and pink, and Elena was laughing at something Dante had said when he suddenly went quiet. She looked at him, concerned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Dante said. "I'm just realizing how different my life looks now compared to before you. How different I am." "Is that good or bad?" Elena asked. Dante reached across the table and took her hand. "It's terrifying," he admitted. "Because you made me realize that control is an illusion. I can't control whether you stay or leave. I can't control whether you love me or stop loving me. I can't control outcomes no matter how much I try. All I can do is show up every day and try to be worthy of your choice to be here. And that's such a fundamental shift from everything I believed about power and safety that sometimes I don't recognize myself anymore." Elena squeezed his hand. "But are you happy?" she asked. Dante looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. A real smile, unguarded and genuine. "Yes," he said. "For the first time in my life, I'm actually happy. Not satisfied, not accomplished, not in control. Happy." That's all I ever wanted for you, Elena said softly. Dante stood and walked around the table, kneeling beside her chair. Then marry me, he said. Not because a contract says you have to, not because of obligation or debt or anything, except that we love each other and want to build a life together. Marry me as an equal partner, as someone who chooses me every day the way I choose you. Elena felt tears stream down her face. Yes, she said. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. The wedding was small, just a few close friends, and Elena's father, who'd been shocked but ultimately supportive when Elena had finally told him the truth about where she'd been for that year. Not the details, but enough for him to understand that she'd sacrificed for him and found something unexpected in the process. They were married in the workshop that Dante had converted into Elena's home office, surrounded by books and art and the life they'd built together. And as they exchanged vows, Elena looked into Dante's eyes and saw everything they'd overcome to get here. The debt that had brought them together, the contract that had bound them, the control that had defined their relationship, the fear that had nearly destroyed them, and ultimately, the love that had transformed them both. I spent my whole life believing I was too dangerous to love, Dante said, his voice thick with emotion. That the only way to protect myself was to control everything and everyone around me. You taught me that real strength isn't in control. It's in letting go. It's in trusting someone enough to be vulnerable. It's in choosing love even when it terrifies you. I spent my whole life being small, Elena responded, her own voice breaking. Being careful, being invisible, living half a life because I was too afraid to claim space in the world. You taught me that I deserve to take up space. That submission isn't weakness, it's a gift. That I can be strong and vulnerable, powerful and surrendered, free and bound, all at the same time. They kissed, sealing promises that went far beyond any contract. And as their few guests cheered, Elena thought about the girl who'd walked into a marble office 18 months ago, desperate and terrified, offering herself as payment for her father's debt. That girl had thought she was trading her freedom for his safety, but she'd actually been trading one kind of life for another, a small, careful existence for something vast and terrifying and beautiful. She'd learned that love could exist in the darkest places, that surrender could be empowering, that being owned could paradoxically be the path to finding yourself. And most importantly, that sometimes the sacrifices we make for others end up being the greatest gifts we give ourselves. As the sun set over the city that had witnessed their entire journey, Elena and Dante stood together, no longer captor and captive, owner and possession, dominant and submissive. Just two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way, who'd been reshaped by their connection, and who'd learned that the deepest freedom sometimes comes from choosing to bind yourself to another person completely. They'd started with a contract built on debt and obligation, but they'd built something far more valuable, a love that existed not despite the power dynamics that had brought them together, but because of them. A love that understood that vulnerability and strength weren't opposites, that control and surrender could coexist, that being fully seen and fully claimed by another person could be the most liberating experience of all. Elena's father eventually paid his debt in a different way, by getting treatment for his gambling addiction, by rebuilding his life, by becoming someone his daughter could be proud of again. And when he asked Elena if she regretted what she'd done, if she wished she'd found another way, she told him the truth. She'd walked into Dante's office thinking she was sacrificing herself, but she'd actually been saving herself. Because sometimes the biggest prisons aren't made of contracts and obligations. They're made of fear and smallness and the belief that we don't deserve more than the half-lives we've settled for. And sometimes it takes being owned completely to understand what it means to truly own yourself. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from, and if you felt it was really worth it, consider becoming a member to get early access to upcoming stories. Your support makes all the difference, because at the end of the day, we're all carrying debts, maybe not to the Mafia, but to fear, to trauma, to the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we deserve. And sometimes, the only way to pay those debts is to surrender completely, to let ourselves be reshaped by love, to trust that being vulnerable won't destroy us, but transform us. Elena walked into that office as payment for her father's debt, but she walked out having paid a debt to herself, the debt of living small and safe instead of big and real. And in the end, that was the debt that mattered most.